Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt. Here we are talking about some of the greatest business deals ever made. The greatest companies in the world are moving into the United States, and you want to ask about whether or not Signal works. I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. First of all, if anything is defective, it's not Signal. The scandal that began there just keeps getting worse. Over the past few days, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and his company of fools have issued repeated denials asserting that no war plans, no classified details of the airstrike against Houthi targets in Yemen were revealed. In the least surprising development ever, those denials have proven to be lies. The reporter who was let in on this highly sensitive group chat faced a huge dilemma after being called a liar himself by some of the most powerful people in the world, the Secretary of Defense and the President among them. He had one way to prove that they were the ones not telling the truth: release the texts. Here's how he explained the dilemma his team faced. The statements by Hegseth, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and Trump, combined with the assertions made by numerous administration officials that we are lying about the content of the Signal texts, have led us to believe that people should see the texts in order to reach their own conclusions. There is a clear public interest in disclosing the sort of information that Trump advisors included in non-secure communications channels, especially because senior administration figures are attempting to downplay the significance of the messages that were shared. This reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, made a tough call given how sensitive this information was. But I think he made the right one. The attack was already over, and the American pilots were no longer over enemy territory. The important thing for me, as a former military pilot who flew in some pretty dangerous places, the most important thing is exposing just how incompetent America's national security leadership team is so that they can be held accountable, and so that the next time American pilots are asked to fly into harm's way, they don't have to do so wondering if the enemy has had 2 hours to prepare. That's how long it was, by the way, between those American planes arriving over their targets and Pete Hegseth transmitting the details of the strike packages, weapon types, and specific targets. As you can imagine, American veterans are outraged. And as you know, no one does righteous indignation better than Kris Goldsmith, the founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism. Here's part 2 of my conversation with Kris. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on this kind of thing, but I will tell you that when I got my top secret clearance, I had to sign an oath that I wouldn't divulge anything that I learned inside a SCIF, one of those secure compartmented information facilities, for 75 years. So I guarantee you the statute of limitations on the crimes that Hegseth and the Houthi Signal group likely committed is long enough that they could be held accountable by the next responsible administration. Agree with you 100%. And we need some kind of infrastructure, whether it's a law firm working in secret, collecting the data to make sure we have the goods to hold these folks accountable, because it's enraging, it is endangering our buddies, and it is almost certainly criminal.
Yeah. And this is the one chat that got out there.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
If they are using commercially available chat platforms to discuss this attack, I am sure that they are using this on for all sorts of discussions on classified material. And, the reason why they're using Signal is almost certainly because they have deleting messages. And those deleting messages are going to allow them to get away with a lot. And I don't know that there's any way that stays within the bounds of the law for us citizens to try and figure out what they are doing. But I do think that the FBI under the Trump administration is in a position to investigate this. I do think that the offices of inspectors general, not every investigation needs to be cleared by the boss. And I hope that that appointees who have a conscience and those in investigatory roles are doing everything that they can to preserve evidence, knowing that prosecutions will not happen as long as Trump and Musk are in power.
Right. Well, even the deleted messages feature of Signal could be a violation of the Government Records Act. I mean, there are so many layers of this scandal. The fact that one of the parties on the chat was very likely in Russia on his cell phone participating in this chat, that everyone on the group was probably doing it on their cell phones, which, by the way, every time I had to enter a SCIF to communicate in any kind of classified way, I had to leave my cell phone at the door. They're actually on their cell phones doing this. It's insane. I don't think we let this one go, not just like now, but ever, until some of those folks are held accountable. And by that, I mean, hopefully jail time. Who knows?
Yeah.
But,
and, you know, and this may feel like a hard shift, but this also brings us to what another thing I want to talk about is what's going on at the VA. The Trump-Musk administration has been deliberately trying to harass and intimidate every employee of the federal government, period, full stop, but especially at the VA, where they're preparing to lay off 80,000 people. The hiring freezes that they did, they made that mistake in the first administration. They did not learn after 8 years that they shouldn't do it again, but they did it again. We must assume that this disruption in services to veterans is deliberate because they learned that lesson. They got criticized, right? They engaged in a hiring freeze. They kicked volunteers, unpaid volunteers, out of VA hospitals around the country. There are researchers who are engaging in critical research on things like mental health, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, transplant science, all sorts of really important things like chemo. And they just started canceling contracts. One of the contracts that got canceled, I believe it was for the Philly or the Pittsburgh VA. A contract that got canceled was for making chemo meds. It was like they needed to be these different chemicals. I'm oversimplifying this, but different chemicals needed to be combined on site, and a contract was used by an outside contractor to certify what's called a clean room. That's the only way that you can create these medicines on site, is if you have a certified clean room. And the VA just canceled that contract. So they had to stop making chemo meds for veterans. And I don't think that this is negligence, that, you know, people should get a bad review, or even that we should be demanding their resignation. I think that we need to be talking about prosecuting these people, because the mistakes that they are making, they made during the first administration. They got, criticized for it. They responded to the criticism. So they have the knowledge. So they are knowingly compromising veterans' healthcare. I think that, you know, personally, I'm not a lawyer. I think that that is traitorous. I don't imagine that, you know, a future DOJ might move forward with a charge like that. But I think that this is willful negligence, and that there should be felony charges for not just what's happening to veteran patients as a result of what's happening to federal employees, but for the deliberate attempt to harass and intimidate government employees on a mass scale. That it goes beyond being a bad boss. This is causing people real pain and suffering, and people need to be held accountable, not with lawsuits that result in, you know, some fines that the government has to pay. They should be held personally responsible.
Are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? you've got to try Manacora honey. For years, I've been using honey instead of sugar as a sweetener, and let me tell you, nothing beats Manacora. It has a rich flavor and a caramel-like texture that puts all other honey to shame. It's also ethically produced by Manacora's master beekeepers in the remote forests of New Zealand. Manacora honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. The bees collect the nectar from the manuka tree in New Zealand. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey that is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. A special antibacterial compound called MGO also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. Manacora third-party tests every single harvest for MGO and makes these results available through their QR system. It's a game changer, and all you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka. Additional usage throughout the day is completely fine, especially helping to cut out other sweeteners. It's honey with superpowers. Now it's easier than ever to try Manacora honey. Head to manacora.com/Ken to save up to 31% plus $25 worth of free gifts with the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's manacora.com/Ken to save 31% plus $25 worth of free gifts. Hey, it's Ken. Quick break to let you know we've got a Substack page for the Ken Harbaugh Show. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, check it out. A lot of you already have. Thank you so much. And if you're able to, please subscribe. Every dollar goes back into the show to help with research, production, and reporting from places like Ukraine. None of this happens without your support. Thank you. Welcome to the resistance. Well, we need to be sending some kind of signal that there will be consequences, because otherwise the burden is just shifted to ultimately the taxpayer, right? When we're talking about the government paying these fines or damages or whatever, I'm thinking about the shutting down of the suicide hotline, right? I can't think of a clearer example of gross negligence than making that resource unavailable. It's, again, one of these things that absolutely infuriates me. And at the same time that is happening to the VA because of Musk and his DOGE cuts, the House and Senate are cutting $23 billion from the PACT Act. The first letter of PACT is promise. It's a promise to America's veterans, right? A promise made because of the burdens folks on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan carried, breathing the fumes from the burn pits. I mean, I think the PACT Act goes all the way back to some of the Agent Orange victims, right? We made a promise to take care of those people because of what we as a society asked them to do. And the Republican House and Senate not only took away the $23 billion of funding to support the PACT Act, they plussed up the DOD budget. That's a pretty clear signal that we'll pay for you to go to war, but we won't take care of you when you come back.
Yeah. And I think that this messing around with VA and veterans benefits, I think, is the one thing that is going to start breaking the cult. It's too early. You know, I am still getting trolled online by MAGA veterans who say the VA is always terrible. The VA failed me. The VA is the reason why I am alive, and many of my friends who have struggled with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, not to mention the physical ailments. Like, I was exposed to burn pits. I've had like mystery lesions in my lungs. I've been on asthma medication since I got back from Iraq, right? The idea that they can start taking these benefits not just from liberal veterans or Democrat or progressive veterans or veterans that don't vote. They're taking it away from MAGA veterans. And let me tell you, there are a lot of really unhinged MAGA veterans. And when these guys who've been getting the best healthcare in the world for some, years, decades even, when suddenly that rug gets pulled out from under them, they're not going to be mad at me. They're not going to be mad at Bernie Sanders or AOC or any of the Democrats who keep talking about trying to save the VA. They're going to be mad at Elon Musk. They're going to be mad at Donald Trump. And I think when it comes to healthcare, and when it comes to things like disability payments, getting missed or just getting outright canceled. I think there are going to be a lot of MAGA veterans who snap out of the cult. And I'm not saying they're going to suddenly, stand by my side in criticizing the Trump administration. But I do think that they're going to be a major problem. I think that as Trump, Trump is going to continue campaigning. His PAC is still collecting money as if he's running for president again. When Trump starts stumping around the country, even if they're looking at the voting history and the registration of people who try to get into these spaces, there are going to be a lot of pissed off veterans, and that is going to be something that I think really starts to break apart the MAGA cult in a way that nothing else would.
Well, I think we are definitely in the FAFO stage right now, which brings us full circle. Remind us what your podcast is called, what it's about, and where people can find it.
We could have scripted this and it wouldn't have gone better. So the name of our podcast is the Find Out Podcast, as in America fucked around, went fast and loose with our democracy last November. And every day we have to wake up and find out what is ahead for us. So you can look for the Find Out Podcast on YouTube, Substack, Spotify, Apple, you name it. Anywhere that you get a podcast, we are available. And we are still small enough right now that we can respond to comments. So we love feedback. Please hit us up. If you think we're terrible, tell us that too. Let us know, because this is something that I think is very needed. And we want to make sure that we're doing it right. We've only got 2 episodes. We've got a lot of room for improvements.
Awesome. Great. As always, having you, Kris. Good luck with the show. We'll put everything in the notes down below.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.